Thanks so much for joining me today. So Donald Trump has been in office for a little over 5 weeks now. And when he came in with this wide-ranging agenda that he was going to do so much and that he was going to be so successful. And in fact, if you look at his own public comments, he keeps saying that he's been a historic president in this 1 month alone, that he's achieved so much. Yet the facts don't really fit that whole narrative. In fact, if you asked me, based on what I've been seeing, and I think what we've all been seeing, it's a pretty embarrassing time to be Donald Trump right now. He loves to say that he's done a lot, but it really has not been that pretty of a past few weeks for him, especially in the last few days. We have to think about all the things that he said he'd come in to do. He said he'd work on the economy. He said he'd work on immigration. He said he'd work on cutting down the federal government. He said that he would be a president for all Americans. He said all these things, but then decided to act in direct contradiction to all of that. But he acted in that way, not like through a change in policy views. No, it was through either sheer incompetence or through a realization that a lot of what he wants to do is just not feasible. And we're beginning to see that play out in large amounts. If we want to talk about his efforts to cut down the federal government, we're starting to see more and more reports of this administration trying to take a sledgehammer, or if Elon Musk's chainsaw trademark, they want to take these aggressive cost-cutting measures through DOGE, and they want to cut people out of the federal government. However, this has caused a lot of confusion, it's caused a lot of distress, and it's really complicated the operations of the federal government, not because they've fired people and so they don't have people. No, they fired people, realized that they shouldn't have fired those people, and are now scrambling to hire them. I mean, nothing screams government efficiency than accidentally firing people and then spending more money to find them. I mean, here's some examples of what Donald Trump's administration has done in the name of cuts. They have fired at the National Nuclear Security Administration, so the people responsible for seeing the nation's nuclear arsenal. They were all mistakenly, nearly all of them, were mistakenly terminated from their roles. These really important jobs, making sure our nukes are safe, and they were all fired, and then all of a sudden they realized, oh shoot, we accidentally fired the people responsible for our nuclear weapons and nuclear arsenal. Whoops, we got to bring them back. At the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, approximately 1,300 probationary employees were just dismissed, blanket dismissal. That impacted critical public health functions, and now the administration is trying to work their hardest to reinstate some of these workers to maintain actual essential health services. At the Department of Agriculture, several employees working on the federal response to bird flu, the thing that's shot up the price of our eggs, the people that are responsible for working on that and are trying to bring a conclusion to it, or at least bring a solution to it, the administration decided to just fire the people working on that at the Department of Agriculture. Now the department is trying to rescind these layoffs. The Department of Veterans Affairs, probationary employees, including staff members, were terminated, raising concerns about the delivery of services to our veterans. This guy says he's a pro-veteran president, not really showing that right now. In fact, 1 in 3 federal workers in general are veterans, so that's a whole other thing. But the VA is now trying to address these errors and trying to maintain continued support for veterans at a lower capacity. At the Department of Health and Human Services, more than 2,000 probationary employees were fired, affecting various health services. Now efforts are underway to reinstate those people. It's either incompetence or it's poor planning, which you could argue poor planning is just another form of incompetence. Whatever you want to call it, the people that we always thought, like, oh my gosh, are going to be the people that are going to dismantle the federal government meticulously one by one, these are the people that are really doing that right now. And clearly they're not doing a very good job of it. It's okay, champ. It's not that easy. You'll get it. You'll get it maybe one day. But This administration, like these firings, accidental firings, and then forced rehirings make things really awkward. And actually, a lot of people don't want to come, like they'll come back. There are people that are coming back to work in the federal government, but there are people that are saying, maybe I don't want to work in the federal government. Maybe I don't think that I can reliably hold my job again because of these arbitrary cuts that they're currently making and just literally randomly firing people overseeing the nuclear arsenal. Like, who are they to trust this federal government to support them, to actually employ them with an intention of keeping them? I don't think that this is something that necessarily is something that federal employees believe. And I would think of it that way. If I got fired randomly one day by some guy that isn't even supposed to work in the federal government, Elon Musk, and then I was asked to be brought back because they accidentally fired me, I'd really question what happened. But it's not just the firings and then the rehirings and the confusion about that. Remember Donald Trump's immigration plan? His plan was to conduct those mass deportations. So what we started to get early on in the administration is this effort from the Department of Homeland Security to relocate migrants to Guantanamo Bay. That's the place where we put terrorists, where we put enemies of the United States. We put them at Guantanamo Bay. So this administration, in their infinite wisdom, decided that that would make sense to do. Until they realized, they're like, they're going to do this whole plan. And then they realized that the conditions at Guantanamo Bay were not suited to house people, these migrants that they wanted to relocate. It's all a made-for-TV thing, by the way. Like, they can just send them back, but no, they want to make a show out of it, so they wanted to send them to Guantanamo Bay. Poor thing for them was that their set, Guantanamo, does not have the right conditions to house people, and so there were ethical concerns about hosting these migrants at Guantanamo Bay. Reports revealed that nearly 180 migrants were detained there under harsh conditions before being deported to Venezuela. And now there are plans to accommodate up to 30,000 migrants at the facility. Those plans were halted because of inadequate infrastructure and legal challenges and ethical challenges. So, you know, they had to reverse on this made-for-TV event. But now there's like this new proposal that's coming out, and I don't know much about it, but maybe I'll share it right now. It's this idea of $25 billion worth of a private army that would report directly to Donald Trump, maybe now takes care of migrants, and they would process migrants at their own facilities in cities across America. I mean, as if a private army that answered to only one leader, like that's always worked. But yeah, in terms of that whole Guantanamo Bay idea, they dropped that idea pretty quickly. And it's reflected in the president's approval rating, which has been not so good. It's been the honeymoon period for Donald Trump, I'll say right now, is over. The honeymoon period is that period of time where the president is positively approved, like more Americans like their work than disapprove. Right now, a CNN poll says 55% of Americans don't feel that Trump is paying attention to the most important problems facing the country. And you know what? If arbitrarily cutting programs and turning Gaza into a golf course and sucking up to Putin are not like the national agenda, I wouldn't be so surprised. But, you know, 55% of Americans don't think Donald Trump is responding to the issues of the American people. American Research Group puts his disapproval rating at 51%. An Ipsos poll has Donald Trump 6 points underwater, 50% disapproval to 44% approval. It's not looking good. People are not liking the work of this administration, and they're definitely not liking the work of Donald Trump. These constant reversals, these unpopular policies, and really just pure incompetence in the execution of these unpopular policies are all backfiring real time on Donald Trump. And don't take my word for it. Don't take the polling for it. We're starting to see that across the country in town halls everywhere. Republican members of Congress are facing backlash from their constituents, intense criticism over what is happening in this country. It's like it's the craziest and most chaotic thing that we're beginning to see, and people are really upset, and they're making it known to their representatives, which I applaud, because if you're dissatisfied with things, go to these town halls and voice your opinions to your representatives. Here's a clip of a congressman from Georgia facing constituents, and a warning, it's pretty tough if you don't have thick skin.
You can go and yell all you want, but I can't understand 10 people, let alone 100 people. You can go and yell all you want, but I can't understand 10 people, let alone 100 people.
It's your job to control the budget, not the president. And you are doing us a disservice to set that down and not stand up for us and control it.
So if we're going to have a town hall, and I'm going to come and stand in front of you and take your questions and try to answer them as honestly as I can, then let's do that, okay? But if you're going to just yell at me, that's not going to be an effective town hall. I get it.
Ouch. That tough crowd. And so Republicans' response to this whole backlash from their own people, their own constituents, you'd think would warrant like a response of like, oh, we hear you, we stand in solidarity with you, we care about what you think. I don't know. Let's look at what they are actually saying. So this is the chairwoman of the House Republican Conference. Take a look at her response to what's going on at these town halls.
I want to start with last week. Videos of protesters yelling at members of Congress went viral, right? But the content focused on the confrontation, not the why. Some of the people that hijacked those town halls are happy with the bloated status quo. They want the bloated status quo to continue. They don't want to get our country back on track. Yet Democrats are soliciting sob stories from bloated bureaucrats with six-figure salaries. Give me a break. Now, it's time for us to tell our story.
Yeah, that's going to look really good in the ads for the midterms. Sob stories. No. And so what is the official Republican response to the backlash they're facing from their constituents, the constant criticism of saying you're not doing your job, you're not standing up to a poor judgment of policy, let's call it that if we want to be nice today. What's the solution? Republicans have decided, in order to avoid further negative exposure, GOP members are postponing their their public forums, or just canceling them altogether. They're just putting a halt on all their town halls because they want to insulate themselves from the public criticism. They don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to answer their constituents. It's quite the interesting strategy. That was a joke. And then lastly, so that's the American people are upset about what's going on. But let's also look at the judicial branch, because in another embarrassing story for this president, 3 of his policies were halted in the same 90-minute span by the courts, signaling legal challenges to agenda. First, there was a federal funding freeze. Do you remember that? That was when they froze federal funds and put millions of Americans in chaos. U.S. District Judge Lauren Ali Khan issued a preliminary injunction blocking the administration's attempt to freeze up to $3 trillion in federal grants and loans, criticizing the move as, quote, ill-conceived and highlighting potential catastrophic programs or impacts on programs for vulnerable groups. Second executive order blocked, the refugee resettlement suspension. A federal judge in Seattle blocked an executive order suspending the U.S. refugee resettlement program, stating that the president cannot override laws by Congress. USAID ultimatum, so that was also blocked. A court yesterday, and there should be a recording of it somewhere. It was hilarious when I listened to it on TV. But basically, a judge reprimanded Trump's lawyers, White House lawyers, for basically struggling to tell us if USAID had been frozen or unfrozen, because they were supposed to be unfrozen, because another judge said that they had to be unfrozen. These people could not answer if those funds had been frozen or were still frozen or not. So now they have until midnight tonight, so tonight, February 26th, they have until tonight to unfreeze USAID frozen aid. Republicans are obviously very upset at the judicial system. They're very sad that people are somehow, these people in these robes in these things called courtrooms are declaring what we do illegal. How unfair. So that is what we're seeing in terms of the judicial branch of our government. But yeah, it's been an embarrassing few days for Donald Trump. Like, constant reversals of firings. Whoops, didn't mean to fire people looking after bird flu, or his diminishing honeymoon period, or Americans across the country screaming at their Republican members of Congress for not standing up to him, or how 3 different courts blocked 3 of his policies in the same span of 90 minutes. It's not a good time to be Donald Trump. It's really embarrassing time. But I would argue it's an even more embarrassing time to be Donald Trump's best friend, Elon Musk, right now. And we'll talk about him in just a second, but we'll see you after a quick break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. But on the other side, we'll talk about Elon Musk and his whole chaos. One of the realities of living in the Trump era, in this new Trump era, is that it's become really overwhelming and really complicated to keep track of the news. And it's become even harder to pay attention to what's going on outside of the United States. But whether it's the invasion of Ukraine, or crises in the Middle East, or the conflict between Sudan and the DRC, or elections happening in countries around the world, it hasn't been more important to pay attention to what's going on outside of the United States' borders. And that's why I listen to the Stay With Me Here podcast. It is a great show hosted by my friend Jacob Shropshire and Aaron Flanagan, who are two amazing Paris-based American journalists who are both very committed to reporting the facts and providing you the best analysis of things going on outside of our borders, and stuff that we should, quite frankly, be paying attention to a lot more. And I love their motto. Their idea is to bring you all the stuff you need to know and none of the stuff you don't. And I love that, because they always do that. They always bring the best analysis and the best thoughts on the things that are going on across the globe. They just recently celebrated their 100th episode. Many congratulations to them. So you know they're doing the right thing. Like, you know they know what they're doing. They know their chops. And with Aaron's background in military intelligence and Jake's experience on political campaigns, it's an amazing duo. They bring some incredible insights, and it's a quick once-a-week episode and will make you more informed. So next time you're sitting at the dinner table and you are having an argument with someone about something happening in this corner of the world, you will know a lot more. And the show is called the Stay With Me Here podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. Thanks for coming back. So, like I said before the break, it's been a really tough time to be Donald Trump. It's been an embarrassing time, but it's been an even more embarrassing time, believe it or not, to be Elon Musk. And let me explain why. So Elon Musk, I guess not anymore the administrator of Doge, but we're going to call him Mr. Doge. Mr. Doge has done a few things lately that have sparked attention. One of those things being inaccurate statements on how much cost-cutting Doge has done, because as we know, Doge's entire purpose is to go into the federal government and chainsaw through unnecessary programs and save money for the taxpayer and all that good stuff. Like that's what their goal is. Like that's what their goal is. But if you look at their website used to have the top 5 biggest spending cuts. And then all of a sudden, just a few days ago, all those cuts were removed. And it's like, why not? Why are you removing it? Well, here it's their wall of receipts, and they had to remove it due to inaccuracies in their reporting. Surprise, they don't know what they're doing. So our friends at Doge, who are apparently math geniuses, which means they should know everything, these math geniuses made a couple of minor errors in their reporting, including reporting that they made cuts of worth $8 billion in ICE contract, $8 billion in savings, which was actually supposed to be $8 million. They triple counted, so they counted the same thing 3 times, a $655 million worth of cuts were mistakenly counted 3 separate times. The same thing, counted 3 times to mark total savings. At least 14 instances of duplicated contracts were identified, totaling $325 million in overstated spending. There was an accounting error, which, for example, and there's a lot of these, where there was $8 million of the contract that was reported saved, even though $3.8 million of it was already spent. Nearly 40% of the canceled federal contracts do not represent actual savings at all. And the idea that Trump wants to see $1 trillion worth of spending cuts from Doge, they've hit a couple billion. They're not very good at it. And it's just all these things, like these math geniuses, 8 billion, 8 million, ooh, what's the difference? Or let's report the $655 million worth of aid 3 times, because that's such a genius move. Or the 14 instances of duplicating the same contract, duplicated same contracts, $325 million. This is embarrassing, and so they had to quietly scrap some of those top 5, and these, not all of these are top 5, but these are the funny stories I found. But they had to quietly scrap the top 5 things on the wall of receipts. Not fun. Then, as if that wasn't like embarrassing, there were mass resignations of Doge staffers. So there was a protest against policy directions. 21 federal technologists from the U.S. Digital Service, which basically was turned into Doge after Trump came into office. 21 people in this agency resigned, alleging that Doge's spending cuts compromised critical public services. Surprise. Principled resignations are happening a lot in this administration, but I think this is the principled resignation that everyone should be paying attention to. These people that literally worked with Elon Musk were actual employees of Doge. They were concerned over data security. They were worried that efforts were being used to compromise essential services and place Americans' data at risk. So when we were talking about how they have access to Treasury Department's payment systems, how they have access to your social security number, that's where this concern was coming from. And that's what people that were working there were reporting. And also, it was a hostile work environment, apparently. Reports are indicating that new Doge engineers interrogated civil servants about political loyalty and contributing, and that contributed to a toxic working atmosphere. Surprise. None of this is surprising. And then there was leadership confusion in Doge. Like, you know how we said that Elon Musk was like the top dog at Doge? He's like, he knows exactly what he's doing. Apparently he's not the top administrator. No, apparently, despite Elon Musk's prominent role and basically, yeah, well, you can decide what he basically does. But but instead of like him actually being the top administrator, apparently we're starting to hear that this lady named Amy Gleason, a former U.S. Digital Service employee, is the actual acting administrator of Doge. She is not in D.C. She's apparently from Tennessee, not D.C., and apparently was not really aware of the fact that this was a role that they were going to make public until they did. And the White House was very evasive about it. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt consistently declined to tell reporters the name of the administrator of Doge, which am I crazy to think that that would have been Elon Musk since he's been spearheading everything? I guess. But that contributed to a lot of ambiguity regarding the overall structure of Doge. Now we know it's this lady from Tennessee who's overseeing that. Okay. So Elon Musk basically does not have the job we all thought he had. Elon Musk also sent out this disastrous email earlier. Basically, it was like a stupid homework assignment. Like, it was so high school. It was basically an email that every federal worker got that said, tell us 5 things that you have managed to achieve in the last week. And you have to tell us by Monday. Caused a lot of confusion because there were agency heads, including at the Department of, or at the FBI and at the Office of the Intelligence Director, DNI, Tulsi Gabbard's job. A lot of confusion from Homeland Security and Treasury. Like, all these people, they're saying, don't answer that email. Because the thing was, if you didn't answer that email, they would have taken it as your resignation. Who would have taken it as your resignation? Again, unclear. No one knows what's going on. But Elon Musk sent out that whole thing. And like, okay, he's the administrator at Doge or something. So like, I don't know. He's not their boss, but like, I guess he's supposed to find like inefficiencies in the federal government. So he's doing that. But he sent out that email. He's like, tell us 5 things that you have done in the last week. Okay. Elon Musk has another job. So he had the audacity to send that email. He actually has a job of his own, which is running this company called Tesla. The electric cars, the ones that made this beauty. Yeah, he's supposed to be, like, that's his thing. So what has Elon Musk done in his job in the last 5 days? Well, I don't know what he's done. Maybe not a lot, because we're starting to get reports about Tesla's performance, particularly in Europe, where they're having declining sales. In January, Tesla's European sales plummeted 45% compared to January of 2024. Market share has reduced from 1.8% to 1%, while overall electric vehicle sales in the region surged by like 37%. And this is a biggie. There's been a significant drop in Tesla's stock price because now the company's market capitalization is valued at less than $1 trillion. It's down from $1 trillion to, at least from what we last got, $974 billion. So Elon Musk has a lot of nerve to ask every federal employee how well they've been doing in their job, because clearly he's not doing a good job at his own. Because first and foremost, he is running Tesla, and that's what we all knew him for. And he's doing a really bad job. Like, that's what the numbers are telling us. 45% decline in sales. Donald Trump thought he was having a bad week. But yeah, like, I just read to you a lot of embarrassing stories about the president and his, and the first buddy, let's call him that. I don't know where I heard that. I heard that on TV somewhere. The first buddy. But yeah, that's what we're getting. I know I was gone for a few days, and I don't know. I think the Trump administration is going to be on hold while I manage a very hectic schedule. But don't worry, it'll come back, new episodes. I have the scripts all written out too. It's not like I don't want to, it's just I need to find the time to do it. But if you liked my commentary today, then please go ahead and subscribe to the Ishan S Show. Find us on Instagram, on X, wherever else you find the Ishan S Show. You can listen, if you're listening to this on Spotify or other podcasting platforms, follow us. And in addition to that, go to the ishansshow.com for more Ishan S Show content. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'll see you in the next one.